Welcome to OverBoost 16. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is Mattmatt. Mattmatt, thank you for joining me.
You are welcome.
Now, I really, I had wanted to talk to you before, but I noticed you had a recent milestone that I wanted to congratulate you for, which is that you made Twitch partner recently. I
did, yeah. It's very surprising. I was not expecting it.
Now, I wanted to ask, do you feel like you would attribute that to any particular thing that sort of like put you over this? Because I feel like you've been, you have such a wide variety of games you do, and I was curious if you felt like there was, this was really the thing that put me over this line.
Well, that was obviously the release of Last of Us Part 2, which before the game came out, I had this feeling that my channel might take off a little bit, but I wasn't expecting it to go as high as it did. And I wasn't expecting to get partner the first try either, because I only applied once. But yeah, it was that game. Like, I've run a lot of games over the years, and some of the games get more views for me than others, but Last of Us has always been the one that always got me the most views, so I assumed when the new one came out, I would get more, which did happen a lot more than I did expect to get.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a smart thing, because I know you have previously run Last of Us, and so, seizing that opportunity seems like
it was a given. Of course I was going to run it.
Right. Now, now that you have this, do you feel like there's anything that is now enabled by this, that you're like, now that I have the check mark, I'm going to do X? Or do you feel like you're still going to try and keep up your similar variety of runs?
Well, if you may have noticed, after I got partnered, I stopped streaming Last of Us 2, because if I hadn't have got partnered, I probably would have stopped anyway, because I was getting quite burnt out, because in that game there's like an hour of load screens where you're just staring at a black screen for like 10, actually no, it's probably like 20% of the run, you're just staring at a black screen, and the game's long, it's like 6-7 hours, so I was like, I'm not doing it. I got burnt out. I didn't have the motivation to play it, so it kind of looks like I stopped playing it because I got partner, which isn't the case. I just don't want to play that game. But going forward, I'm gonna do what I've always done, which is play loads of different games, maybe go back to some that I've already done. But my channel has always been based around just playing loads of games, running loads of games, different ones. But I'll talk more in a bit about why I run certain games, but yeah, and I will go back to Last of Us Part 2 when the PS5 comes out. Because hopefully then the load screens won't be as long.
Before we transition into talking about how you got into gaming, that might be one sort of fun current events point. So right now we're having this interview in August of 2020, and I think it'll be probably released in early September. And so that means that we're all awaiting news of the PlayStation 5 and its promise of SSD load times and some amount of backwards compatibility. I feel like I've heard every flavor of rumor on it, and so I feel like for you, who has done several PS3, PS4 speedruns, so you do feel like with those games, especially ones with long load times, that kind of puts the brakes on, because you're hoping maybe you can, when you do run those games, you can, in the future, do it with less load time.
Of course. There might be a bit of an issue when it comes to certain games that I've ran, if I can then redo them on PS5, say Uncharted 2, for example, because there is a few tricks in that game, which I'll mention later, which require, certain loads to be slow. If it's too fast, it might not work. So I don't know how, that's going to work. But load screens specifically, I hope they're faster. But the main game that I can think of, or the main games, is the current gen Uncharted. So Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy, they have really bad load screens, as well as Last of Us 2. That's the main three that I can think of that I personally would play or run.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely there with you. I recently, a few months back, ran a PS4 game for the first time, and that was just doing sort of a proof of concept run of Sakura Wars, which is largely a narrative game with some action parts, and that was definitely that was interesting, but a lot of load screens. And so I found myself saying, maybe I'll come back to this in the future if I have, a PS Pro with SSD or a PS5 or something. So, but let's enough about the PS5. Let's talk about how you first got into gaming. Is that something that comes from a particular family or friends? Like, where does it begin for you?
Well, my first console that I played on, I didn't own, was a PlayStation 1 back in, like, I think around 2000. I was 3. And I remember I went to my nan's one day and my aunt bought her PlayStation 1 with it. And I remember the first game that I ever played was actually Pandemonium, if you know what that game is.
Yeah, I think I know it. That's like with the Jesters, and it's like a 3D platformer. Or
yeah, that one,
yeah.
That game I have a lot of nostalgia for it, which I'm quite surprised why I've never ran it, but I would like to. So maybe that will be a game in the future that I will run. But that was the first game I ever played. But the first console that I ever owned was a PlayStation 2. I've always been a PlayStation guy. I mean, actually, I say that I did own a 360. My first like new gen was a 360. Back when like those came out, because the PlayStation 3 was very expensive at the time. Or I would have rather had that, because I've always been a PlayStation guy. But yeah, I got the PS2 in like 2002, I think.
Was that just like a holiday gift, or?
I think I got it for Christmas, yeah, when I was younger. And if you notice, like a lot of the games that I ran are quite old games, so I'll get more into that. But I played a lot of games when I was younger, and
so I guess when you're saying, okay, so going forward from there, has gaming been pretty consistent for you? Like, did you have any phases where you're like, yeah, I'm just into MOBAs or Counter-Strike or an MMO, or have you been sort of mostly just this console single player experience?
My gaming like genre over the years has been all over the place. Like, when I was younger, I mainly played multiplayer shooters like Call of Duty, and I did that for a very long time. But as I got older, I started to drift away from playing shooter games more because it was very stressful, and I got really annoyed. If you watch my speedruns, you know that I get very angry. So
I was watching you play Dead to Rights this week, and that seemed like a frustrating game. And
yeah, that game is that game is something else. But yeah, so I basically played like Call of Duty. I first played Call of Duty back in 2008 because I went to my friend's house, and he just got World at War. It just came out, and he said that there's a zombie mode in it. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So I went to his house and we played it. I really liked it, and I asked my mom if I could have it, and she was like, I can't afford that. You're gonna have to have COD 4 instead. And I'm like, oh, okay. So the first Call of Duty I played was Call of Duty 4, and a little bit after that, I actually traded it in and got World at War, which is what I wanted, and I played that so much. Like, I played the multiplayer with my friends for a good few years, and then basically every single year when the new Call of Duty came out, that was pretty much all I'd do, is play those with my friends for quite a long time, up until maybe 2012, 2013 is when I started to get back from like playing multiplayer games, because I think actually I did play Uncharted 3 multiplayer for quite a while, back in 2012 as well. But after that, I really stopped playing multiplayer games and started focusing more on story stuff, because I just wanted to relax and chill, and that's what I did.
Were you doing that on all the Call of Duty multiplayer friends? Again, I probably missed the detail. Was that on console or was that on PC?
Oh yeah, that was on console.
It was on console.
When I first started playing, I didn't mention that when I first started playing it, I played it on Xbox 360 because all my friends had Xbox from school, so we all played that together. And then in 2012, I sold my Xbox and bought a PlayStation 3. And then for a few years after that, I played the multiplayers on PS3. But I only really got into PC stuff, or PC gaming in general, in 2016, because that's when I got my computer. Because I've always had a really bad laptop. It was basically a laptop that my school gave me to work on, and it was very bad. So in 2016, I bought like a $2,000 computer, which is what I use now. And since then, I've added some stuff to it, but it wasn't till then that I started actually using a proper computer to play games on. And now, obviously, if a new game comes out, I get it on PC. If it's a console exclusive, that's why I have my PlayStation. I'll get on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. PCs they're expensive, especially. You mentioned yours is roughly $2,000, and sometimes it feels like, especially if you're trying to do a new game, playing it, as well as streaming it at the same time, you kind of need to have the beef there.
Exactly. I actually mainly bought, I mean, we're not talking about this game specifically, but I mainly bought a computer just to run Dead Space 3 properly, because that game requires high FPS, and I'm sitting there running the game in like 160p with a custom resolution just so I could push 60 to do some of the tricks. So I actually bought the computer so I could push it further and actually do proper runs. And I've been running that game since then as well. So...
No, that's interesting to note too. The extent to which we're sometimes pushed to get specific hardware in order to do stuff like that. I think that's probably the most prominent example is a speed game where you need to be able to generate high frames in order to do certain tricks. That sort of thing can get really, really out of hand sometimes.
I hate them. I can't stand them, but sometimes, there's nothing you can really do about it. And speaking of Dead to Rights earlier as well, there is a trick that you can do on the PC version which allows you to basically clip through walls at 200 FPS. But when you have the game at 200 FPS, the enemies don't have like a cap for their shooting, so they just keep shooting and they don't stop. So you die instantly. So it's pointless to run. You can't...
Well, I mean, I feel like then you would get into a discussion about, having a utility to change frame rate or something, which seems like probably more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, I've never been an advocate of, like, changing the frame rate cap in runs. Like, it's okay if you want to cap it at a specific thing for the entire thing, then that's fine. But changing it throughout, I'd never really liked that. And with Dead to Rights, you actually soft lock the game in the tutorial if you have it at 200 FPS. So it's just...
Yeah,
it just doesn't work. So
seems like it's probably just inoperable, really. Yeah,
it's not good. So I played it on GameCube, but there's no glitches in the run at the moment on the console. But it's fun. I do like doing it, even though it is frustrating at times. I'd rather do that than constantly keep dying just so I can do a skip that maybe saves a minute when I die more times than lose the time that would save. It's just not worth it.
Seems like you might as well just play like roughly glitchless than deal with that. Well, actually, so let's get into it then. We're already, obviously, we're both bursting at the seams with speedrun topics here. What's your first exposure to speedrunning?
I mean, it's taken different forms because from basically my entire time I've gamed, I've always liked the idea of, like, say if there's a time trial in a game or something, I always liked the idea of that, like the Mirror's Edge time trial, so we have to beat a level in a certain time, and, I've always liked that. But I never took speedrunning seriously until, I guess, 2014. I did, basically, Outlast had just came out on the PS4, and it had a mode called Insane, where basically, if you die, that's it, game over, and you have to start all over again. And I had this thing in my head to speedrun that, and I did that for about a few weeks. I did stream it on a really old Twitch channel, but no one watched me.
Were you using like a timer, or does Atlas have an in-game timer?
I was just doing it to try and beat the game. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really doing it for the speed, more so it was just to say I could speed run through it and not die a bunch of times. I did enjoy that. It was just like doing a run. I didn't really care about how fast I beat it. I just wanted to beat the game a few times, and that was pretty much that wasn't serious though for me. That was just a little bit of fun. It didn't get serious for me until I think it was about May 2015, because this is what we're getting to Last of Us. When Last of Us came out on PS3, I basically played half of the game. I got sidetracked doing other stuff, got bored of it, sold it. And to be fair, that was probably the best decision I could have made, because in 2015 I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it on PS4, I'll play through it, I'll try it again. And I beat the game, and I was like, I don't know how to describe it. I was just like jaw dropped about how good it was. I wanted more, so I did everything I could in the game. I got all the collectibles, did all the trophies and all that. And then after I finished at that time, I still wanted more, but I didn't have a reason to play the game. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to speedrun it. And I remember that I streamed my first run. It was on New Game on Easy, and I had one viewer, and it was one of my real life friends who I told I was going to do it. And I beat the game in 4 hours. So that was my first proper real speedrun, was that.
That's neat. Honestly, I definitely relate to that sort of story, because I feel like what you got to there was that you really, that was your moment of crossing over. So you had already been sort of familiar with the idea of, beating a game in a single sitting, like you did with Outlast, or doing time trials, things like that. But that was sort of like you had gotten to the end of a game and you're like, I want more, and how can I get more? I think that's exactly how I ended up, actually, because I had been watching speedruns for years myself, but then when Just Cause 3 came out, I played it, did everything, like, okay, now what can I do more? And that was what finally pushed me over the edge. So it's very interesting to hear that was your experience, specifically too for the PS4 version of Last of Us. So going from there, how does that turn into...
Actually, there is one thing I didn't mention.
Okay.
My first exposure to actual speedrunning was back in like 2013, because I remember I was on YouTube and I came across Joshima's, and I started watching his highlight videos and stuff like that, or stuff that he'd done on San Andreas, which is why when I came into your stream the other week, I really want to run it, because that San Andreas was technically my first game that I watched get ran, and I remember watching his ESA 2013 run, and I watched the entire thing, and it was very long. It was like 6 hours, but I watched it all because I really enjoyed it. And I was lucky enough that a few years ago, back in 2017, I was actually able to go on Joshima's Just Chatting podcast. So going from that to then being able to talk about my speedruns to him on his little chat show was really cool.
Yeah, that's neat too. Some folks stick around, you end up able to meet them, and contrary to what people say about never meet your heroes, sometimes they turn out to be pretty nice, and I feel like Josh is definitely one of those.
Yeah, Josh is a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so you got The Last of Us was really was a big sort of turning point, and you speedrunning yourself. From there, do you feel like there's any particular trajectory that covers what you've run, like any sort of like theme or something like that like, oh, I see a game that looks like this, I'm gonna try and run it?
Honestly, from that point, it ruined me, because every single game that I played that came out, I wanted to run it. So after Last of Us, there was a few stuff that I did. There was a game called Daylight, if you've heard of it. It's like this little horror game, which came out on PS4. It's also on Steam. But it's basically this randomly generated world where every single level is random every time. So it was fun and interesting for me to try and run it and try and get a fast time. The concept for each level was still the same, but it was just the layout of the level and how you got to the certain items you needed to pick up in order to exit the level. And I did that for a while. And then I think after that, Until Dawn came out, and I ran that, which is, Until Dawn isn't a typical speedrun because it's a narrative game. You just walk around a couple of times, pick choices, but Until Dawn is one of the games, even back then, that was one of my most popular, that people loved watching it, because people would come into my stream, and since you got to experience the entire story, there was no glitches, no skips, you couldn't skip cutscenes. You got to watch the story, and people would get really involved in the chat about the story and stuff, and it was very cool to see that. But my genre of speedruns has been it's all over the place. I ran so many different types of games over the years, and even after that, Daylight compared to Last of Us is nothing alike, because Daylight's a first-person survival horror game where you just walk around. Last of Us is a third-person shooter, so.
Yeah, no, it's big variety. Do you feel like that variety helps keep speedrunning fresh for you? Like that, maybe that's part of why you do it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've done so many games, so many different games over the years, so many different genres, and I mean, there has been times where I've got bored of a game specifically, but I've never really got bored of it in a whole. But one of the main things, I don't know if you were going to bring it up, but one of the main things that I do, and I'll talk about this when I get to Blade 2, was glitch hunt. Mm-hmm. That's apart from speedrunning, I've always been interested in glitching games, routing games, and all that. That was one of my things that I enjoyed more than actually running the game. So it was nice for me to find a game, to route it, to glitch it, and then run it with all those skips. And that was one of the main things that I enjoyed, but I don't really do that much anymore, because I'm not as good at glitch hunting as I used to be. I'm kind of washed up, to be honest.
No, I mean, one of the questions that I do get to in sort of this part that we're focusing on just you speedrunning generally is asking, do you feel like you have a mission statement or role when it comes to speedrunning, such as, grinding versus glitch hunting versus routing? And it sounds like you certainly have an interest and you enjoy glitch hunting, but as time has gone on, that maybe your particular role has sort of morphed.
I would say so. I mean, right now, most days, it's more about the running than the actual glitching. But, over the years, I've found a lot of glitches in games. Like, when the Uncharted came out on PS4, most of the glitches that are in those games I found. And those main glitches are the ones that are used the most in the runs now. And just stuff like that, I put a lot of effort into finding some of these things that change the routes for these games that already had pre-routes before, but then I came along and changed it as well. And a person I'd like to mention is actually Toxic, because Toxic TT, he's come into he basically started running one of the games that I ran, and then he decided to run a bunch of other games I've ran too, and he's one of these people that does manage to change routes for games. Like Blood Rain, for example. That game had a route, and he came along into it and completely destroyed the route that it already had, and found I think 6-7 minutes of time save in a game that's 30 minutes long. It's just crazy. And I used to be like that, but not so much anymore. Now I more focus on actually running games, because the problem is I've tested a lot of games, ones that I'd actually want to try and glitch, and I've done them all. I can't find any more now that I'd want to try and glitch and route and then run. And most of the games that come out nowadays, especially ones like console exclusives, tend to not allow you to skip stuff. Like Last of Us Part 2, for example, is very, very, very lenient when it lets you skip. You can't just go out of bounds and, hit a checkpoint, because most of the time they're not there. And that's the problem with me now with glitch hunting. I kind of lost motivation, because it's really annoying when you spend hours and hours and hours trying to click through a wall. You finally manage to do that, and it doesn't lead to anything, because most of these developers now don't let you skip stuff.
Yeah, the things that happen now when you're trying to activate an end level trigger doesn't quite work like it does in some of the earlier games, which is a shame, because sometimes it is really nice to just clip out of bounds and walk straight to the end of the level and activate it, as we'll discuss soon. I wanted to get some general sort of takes from your speedrun catalog. Of all of the games that you have run, what is your favorite speedrun?
Well, let me pull up my page here quickly so I can look through it. I've got a lot of games on it. So you say the one that I enjoy running the most, or just my favorite in the terms of the way I think the speedrun has turned out?
I mean, if you want to give me both, you can give me both. I think that question is meant to be pretty. I would say I mean it to be pretty open ended. So,
well, it's a hard one, because I've done a lot of games. I mean, in terms of a game that I enjoy, and I think that is my favorite that I'd always go back to, would be Uncharted 2, because I played that game a lot. That's probably one of the games that I've ran that I've got the most hours in, because I grinded that game for 8 months straight last year with non-stop every day. So that game for me is probably the one that I'd always look at as my personal favorite to run. But in terms of I guess that one could also be taken as one of the guns that I'm most proud of in terms of the direction it's taken, because I had a lot of an impact in that route on PS4 back in the day. But I'd say the Saboteur is very enjoyable for me as well. It's hard for me to choose. I'd either pick between one of those. I mean, I would pick Blade, but no.
I mean, you can. I'm not going to stop. I'm not here to shame your choices. Well, maybe this will be easier then. So obviously, you have a lot of games that you like, which is maybe not surprising, because you do run a lot of games. How about the flip side? Do you have a speed run you're like, I did this run, and it is of all the games that I've run, it is my least favorite?
Mafia 3, I don't even have to think about that. That game is just horrible. I when Mafia 3 came out, I remember, do you know Torix?
Yeah, I think I've seen Torix around.
Yeah, so me and him were let's route this game when it comes out. Let's try and run it. And it came out, and I played it, and I was like, this game's a bit. Have you played Mafia 3?
I have not played any of the Mafia games. I've heard the reputation that 3 seems pretty divisive as far as I can tell.
Well, I've never played 1 and 2. I jumped straight in 3, and from what I've seen from the other games, Mafia 3 literally has about 6 main story missions, and the rest of it is just like side quests, and that's it for 7 hours. It's not fun, and the speedrun was 7 hours. So I spent like weeks routing it. And I did 1 run and never again, and that was like 4 years ago, and I will never touch that again. That game was horrible.
Yeah, that's a frustrating thing with I feel like there's a bunch of open world games that are like that, where I'd be like, if I could just cruise through the main story missions, I would probably be much more interested in speedrunning it. I mean, off the top of my head, like Just Cause 2 and Scarface come to mind as well as being in that category.
It's not a good speedrun. It had a lot of soft locks. There was times where you could actually run out of money and completely soft lock the game, because the game actually requires you to collect money in order to progress. I had none at all, and I couldn't. There was one point where I literally couldn't do anything, and the game is also very RNG. So in between story missions, you have to collect enough money and stuff to progress in the story. And you do these rackets or like these side quests to do that. And sometimes all the rackets would be random. So it was just annoying to run, because, sometimes you can do an area really fast, and then sometimes it could take you like half an hour longer than it would normally do. And I remember I tried to do a second run, and within the first hour of the game, I'd lost about 15 minutes just to RNG, and then I never played it again. So...
All right. Well, to end this section of the interview on a more optimistic note, how about a game that you would like to speedrun, but, for one consideration or another, you just haven't gotten around to it?
GTA San Andreas has to be. I've always wanted to do it, but I've never took the effort and time to learn it. And that would also be, any percent, not any percent. Not the arbitrary. I have
jump
actually ran any percent. I have done that. I did a run of any percent. It was 16 minutes, I think. I got really lucky because I spent a few days trying to practice the skip. I never got it. I knew how to do it. I just never got lucky with the number. And I tried 1 run and managed to do it on the first try. I don't know how.
But then you stopped. You hang it up after that.
I did actually try a few more times after that, but I just never do it again. So I was like, yep, that's that. But I would like to do, any percent where you play through the game normally, and eventually I probably will learn to do it. But it's taking, because it's a lot of effort to put into a game, especially with how much you have to remember. Yeah. So eventually I'll get to it, but I don't know when that'll be.
No, I hear you. I've started down that road a little bit. I've been my choice, since I am not able to stream too much, was to break it up into segments. So I've just been learning Los Santos recently. But it's
really smart. See, what I would have done is I would have done Los Santos and then done like 1 Los Santos run and then started learning the rest, instead of just constantly grinding that until I got good at it and then switched. Because I'm just impatient. Pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and there's so much there, and it is a fun game. Like, to be clear, I think I certainly agree with you that it's just, I've been surprised how much fun it is to just sort of to be in that setting and drive and shoot and all that. But let's get into some of the games that we're going to discuss. And again, the games we're going to be going over are Blade 2, Uncharted 2, and the Saboteur. And the one I'm most excited to discuss is undoubtedly Blade 2. Now, specifically the video that I watched in prepping for the interview was your run from Valuethon 6. I guess shout outs to Boix. And specifically, the category was any percent New Game Plus, which my understand from the commentary is that the main difference is that you get UV grenades in that, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so
you basically get points throughout the game to unlock weapons, and the more points you get, it unlocks different weapons. And the only reason we do New Game Plus is just for the UV grenades. That's literally the only reason, because other than that, there's no difference.
So now, you have a story with Blade 2. Was it something that you picked up as a speedrun, or was this a game that you had encountered at a younger age?
Well, a general theme with all my games that I've ran, you'll notice a lot of them are old games. Some of them are, ones that I've either been recommended by someone to run, or I'd like the look of it, so I decided to run it. But most of them are just games that I'm very nostalgic about when I was younger. So Blade 2, when I was younger, you may notice that my sub badges on Twitch is the Blade Glaive. When I was younger, I was infatuated with the Blade character from Marvel. I watched all the films, and then I played the Blade 2 game, and when I was younger, it was one of my favorite games to play. And I never actually finished it without cheats because I was that bad. It's actually a really hard game, which I'll get into more in a bit. But I wanted to run it just because it's a game that I played when I was a kid, and I'm running out of those. I mean, like the last one that I've ran that I did play when I was a kid that I've learned was Dead to Rights, and it took me a long time to get around to doing that. But yeah, Blade 2 is one of those games I played when I was younger, and I wanted to get more, out of playing the game. I wanted to go back to it, and yeah, that's where that started.
No, so I assume you probably, because my understanding from looking up this game, this was this game was on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and I guess you would have been playing it on PlayStation 2 as a kid. What version are you playing now? I noticed you're on the leaderboard. It says emulator, and I wasn't quite. Are you playing on PCSX2, or is there a different setup?
I guess it's technically emulator, but I'm playing it on PS3.
Oh, I got a backwards compatible PS3
because it has. I have a modded PS3,
okay.
So I can play backwards compatible games through that. But I class it as an emulator because it does have faster load times. If you played it on PCSX2, it would be faster than the way I run it, but I'm just more comfortable using the console instead of the emulator. But going back to how I started running as well, have you ever heard of the Thrillness or Thrill UK?
I don't think so.
He was a very prominent glitch hunter back in the day. He did a lot of stuff for Metal Gear. He found... I think along with Magnum, we found the skip in Metal Gear Solid 1, the one that skips doing the heli fight. I forgot what it's called, but he had a lot of thing in terms of glitching games. And I remember meeting him when I started running Last of Us, and I was inspired by all the stuff he'd done with glitching. And I remember messaging him on Twitch one day and asking him, how do you do it? Because, I would love to I've got some games that I would love to try and break. Because when I was a kid, I'd never seen Out of Bounds in Blade 2. I didn't even know what it looked like. Had no clue. And I asked him how he does it. And he said, just try stuff. And I was like, okay. So I just tried stuff. And I wanted to glitch Blade 2. That was the first game that I actually tried to glitch hunt was Blade 2. And obviously, as you may have seen from the run, it's very, very broken.
Yeah, as speedruns go, Blade 2 has a truly excellent, I don't know if there's a metric for this, but I always call it like time to first out of bounds, which is like how long does it take in the speedrun for the player to get, and Blade 2, excellent, top tier, first time to get out of bounds.
It's like 10 seconds.
It really is.
Yeah, so that actual skip was one of the I think it was one of the later ones I found, but for the longest time in Blade 2, there's a skip. I don't know if you want to go more into detail about the skip, so I'll let you.
I mean, I would say,
if you want me to talk about it.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the out of bounds skip, because in terms of questions that I would have that would lead to, I think, the answer you're about to give. Certainly, if you want to describe, because you're able to speak to how this run came together since you had done some, the glitch hunting and stuff like that. So certainly, if you want to talk about the discovery or like the different methods of getting out of bounds, because I think one of the things that impressed me watching the run was like the first time I saw you do it, I think it was, you like jumped onto, some kind of debris or furniture and that pushed you out of bounds. But throughout the run, it seems like there's a real plurality of methods that you use to get out of bounds. Yeah. And so if you want to talk, about that, maybe just kind of give the listener an idea of sort of the tool set for going out of bounds and what you can do with that. Feel free to talk about that.
Well, one of the first glitches that I found in that game was, there's a level called Acid Rain. Oh no, I think it's Cover Up actually. The first ever skip I found was the one in Cover Up. So I found out that if you side jumped, I might as well explain how this works actually. So the way the game in Blade 2 checks flaws is it's like, okay, you've side jumped. where's the floor going to be? And then it locks you to that floor. But if you jump and in the middle of the gap, there's a gap where you would drop, the game thinks, okay, he's going to land down there, but you don't. And you would then fall through whatever is under you down to that level of where that floor would be. So I found out that if you jumped from the top of the stairs into like a side barrier, the game would want you to land on the stair level, but you don't. So you just clip through the barrier and land where the stairs level would be. And that was the first out of bounds I found. And I found that you could do that, and then you could move and then jump to the end of the level. And that was the first glitch I found. And that was the only skip in Blade 2 that lasted for years because I couldn't find anything else. And there was at one point where I was like, this game needs more stuff. And I tried so much. And then I found out that you can do the first skip, which you mentioned. If you get yourself into a tight gap, sometimes if you punch, you can then get forced through the wall. So that the first skip I do is that. So basically what you do is you get into a tight little gap, and then you basically what I do there is I backwards punch twice, and it forces me through the wall. And then the level after that, you'll probably notice that as soon as I start the level, I run up the stairs, and then in the next room I like side jump into like a pot. For whatever reason, that was like the second skip I found, or third. You just kind of it just pushes you through the wall. And there's a lot of stuff in Blade. But one of the main things that really broke Blade was the side jumping. But I figured out one day that you could change direction in midair. And it was weird because you'd think if you're jumping right, you would hold left and then you'd go left. But that's not how it worked. If you wanted to change direction, what you would do is you would jump in the direction you wanted to go. So like say if you're on a ledge and there's a floor below you, I'd side jump to where the floor is. And if you hold backwards and press jump again, for whatever reason, he just goes left to the opposite direction. So you basically trick the game into thinking you're going to land on that floor, go back to the ledge you jumped off of, and then you clip through it. And you probably would have seen that a few times as well in the run.
So is the way you describe it, that you're pressing the jump input again after doing the first jump into the air? But it's not like there's like a double jump in the game or something like that. It just happens to be that input is allowing you to change direction midair.
Yeah, if you hold backwards and do nothing, you don't change direction. You have to press jump. I don't know why it works, and that's probably why for the longest time it took me to find that, because I never really put two and two together and realized oh, this is how that works. Because you wouldn't think to change direction you'd hold backwards. You'd think you'd have to hold left, but that doesn't work. You have to hold backwards. It makes sense.
No, well, I mean, that's the thing is that, it probably only makes sense if you look at the code and you find the corner case. And that's so often the case with these kinds of glitches. One thing, that came up when listening to the marathon VOD that I was really curious to get maybe a little bit more of the story about. This game was the last game from a studio called Monkeyfoot Productions. I think that put out a total of 3 games. And yeah, did I hear right that you had some sort of contact with one of the developers at one point about some of the stuff that you found in this game?
Yeah, so I a few years ago when I think I got a 54. That's when I found Bloodsucker skip, because Bloodsuckers I'll get more onto it later, but Bloodsuckers is the worst level in the game, and for a longest time I could never find a skip for it, and that level was the reason I wouldn't run it. And I remember I eventually found that skip and I did a 54 run, and then I contacted him and I was like, hey, people do like this game, whether it made you might leave a sour taste in your mouth because of what happened, but I know people that like it. I like it. Here's a speedrun of it. You should watch it. And he watched the run. He messaged me and told me that it was really cool. Seeing all the glitches and stuff, and he told me also how it annoyed him, or he liked how it annoyed me when the AI would block the doorways because he made them do that on purpose. I'm like, oh, thank you, Mike, it's very nice of you. But yeah, so I spoke to him for a little while. His name's Mike Diskett, by the way. He was the game designer, I think, or like the lead game director. I don't actually remember what it was for that game.
He's the developer, I think, because one of their games I think had the source code released, and I think he was the developer who did that, right? Maybe. Okay, I might have read that.
I think that was Urban Chaos, wasn't it? No.
Yeah, it was Urban Chaos. It was Urban Chaos, yeah, under the MIT license on GitHub. Yeah. Well, at least this is according to Wikipedia. I'm not gonna guarantee Wikipedia. I was just...
Well, I think there was another game before that they made, which he released the code for as well. Okay. But I don't remember what it was.
So, the other game they released is called Startopia.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one he released the code for. I remember seeing that as well. But yeah, so I wish you would give me the Blade 2 code, Mike, if you're listening. Give me that. But yeah, so I spoke to him for a while, and then there was a few other developers that I sent the video to as well. There's a guy called Finn Magetchi. I can't remember his name. He also watched it, and so did Guy Simmons, who was another one who worked on the game. He also watched it. Because it's cool to me that a game that I played when I was a kid. I never would have thought that I'd be able to show the developers of the game, what I was doing, and they're thinking it was really cool. And yeah, so I actually did ask Mike to join me on a stream one day and talk about the game and development and stuff like that, but he said he didn't have time because at the moment he's working on a game that literally got released today, called Windbound, I think it is.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, that's very cool. So maybe now that's come out, I can message you again, ask him to do that. You never know.
I am glad to hear that with all the trials and travails of game development. So often we hear stories about certainly some companies out there which don't treat people well. I'm sort of glad to hear that there's developers out there who are able to feel like they can stay in the industry and do things, and even after something like your company folding. So that's very cool.
Mike's got a big repertoire of companies he's worked for. He's even worked for Rockstar as well. So
now bringing it back to
all those on his Twitter. Okay, no, Karen, you can go.
Bringing it back to Blade 2. You mentioned the Bloodsucker skip. Did you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So the Bloodsuckers is the level before the last one. So it's right at the end of the game, and it's basically if you've noticed, because you would have watched it, there's a few levels where you have to escort a companion to like city sewers. That level we can't skip yet, but it's like 10 minutes long, and you have to escort Whistler while he places some bombs. And the reason why we can't skip that is because the level starts where it ends. So he goes there, comes back, and then it ends the level. We can't figure out if there's a way to trigger the end of the level without doing it. But there's a few of these escort levels, and one of them is at the end of the game. It's called Bloodsuckers, and basically what you have to do is you start the level, you have to go to this helipad, you have to find Dr. Grant. She's this chick who can hack into the core. You have to bring her to the core. Bringing her to the core is one of the most horriblest things you will ever bear witness to. There's so many enemies. She dies so quickly. It's horrible. So I really wanted to find a skip to skip this level. Now, the thing is, you can go to the end of the level, and the end level trigger is right behind this gate. And I was like, how can I hit this? And I managed to get out of bounds in that area, but, I couldn't get up there. And the thing I didn't mention before is that Blade 2 is based on, like, planes. So if you get out of bounds, if you jump to another area, you will zip up to where that area would be. You don't just walk under it. But this area, the trigger was above the level plane, so I couldn't get up to it. And for the longest time, I tried to figure out a way to do it. And I remember one day, I was just messing around. I was like, I'm going to try and jump at the gate for a bit. And I remember walking up to it, and I turned my back to it. I just backwards jumped and went through it. And I was like, what? What just happened? I was so shocked. And I thought at the time it was because of the glaive, because I was messing around with the glaive. But it wasn't. Literally, that's the only gate that you can do that on. Luckily enough, for some reason, I don't know why it works, but if you line yourself up in a specific way with your back facing to it and jump backwards, you just go through it. It must be because maybe there's like a gap in it that you can jump through. But yeah, that skip saved 5 minutes and a lot of heartache, and it's still the best skip in the game in my eyes, because that level is awful.
No, I mean, it seemed like there were some skips you had found, from listening to the marathon commentary, like that, being able to walk past the level where you have to dodge trains was definitely one that seemed like avoiding a lot of trouble. And then the other one that I really liked was being able to put yourself in a position when, I think it's like the last time that Whistler plants bombs, where you can put yourself in a position where the enemy AI just can't get to you. And so they just they all stare
I found
at you.
that by accident. So the old strat for that was to basically that ledge that I dropped to, you can clip through it and go out of bounds. So my old strat was to just go out of bounds, jump to where the water doesn't damage me, and just wait out of bounds. But one day I found out that I dropped down, and I was like, nothing's happening. I turn around, I just see all the enemies just standing there staring, and I'm like, what? And I left it, and they just didn't do anything. They just stood there and watched me while Whistler just went and planted the bombs. And I was like, that is a great strat. So literally the end of the level, the end level of the game, you just sit there for 3 minutes doing nothing. So it's pretty good. But yeah, that level as well is... if you've played Blade 2 casually, not many people have, by the way. It's not a very well-known game. But if you've played it casually, that last level is really, really hard. Because those enemies infinitely spawn. You can't kill them all. They keep spawning. So you have to keep killing them while Whistler's trying to plant those bombs. And if either you die or he dies, you have to start the level again. And it's very annoying. So that strat, to stand on that, is a lifesaver.
No, it definitely seems like it again, takes something that's very stressful and makes it relatively stress-free. So before we move on to Uncharted 2, do you have any future plans to return to this one, or do you want to dare people to compete with your time and then you'll return? Or
I would love more people to run Blade 2 because only me and Toxic have actually ran it with the glitches, and for the longest time it was only me that ran the game with the glitches because that entire game was routed by me. All the skips and everything were found by me, every single one that is in the game, and that's why I like to think it is like my proudest glitching moment because all the stuff in that game I found. But yeah, I'd like more people to run it. I'd like to see more names on the leaderboard. I've had a few people that said they would, but they never did because it is actually quite a hard game to learn as well because a lot of the skips, as you may have noticed, you're like jumping blindly out of bounds. You can't see where you're going. And obviously I've played it for so long, I know where I'm going. But for some people, that just kind of not make them want to do it. But I'd like more people to run it, yeah.
Well, I can tell you that I'm probably going to shop this game to Fast Bad Society, which is a little collective endeavor I do where me and KZ Fru and Makebake and some other people work on quote unquote bad games with the interest of turning them into speedruns. So we'll see if anyone bites there. Maybe you'll be getting a tweet about that in the future. We'll see.
Well, if someone does play that, can they please find a way to skip city sewers? Thank you very much.
No, I will. That will definitely be one of our like we have like a chief glitch hunter who's Cobbly, who does a lot with Mafia 2, I think, and his ability to just like strip things down for parts is uncanny. So we'll see. I don't want to overpromise, but I was definitely already taken with the stuff that you had found. And, and sounds like, if there's more stuff to be found, it's always a fresh set of eyes will help with that. But let's move on to Uncharted 2. With this, I had watched, I think, a VOD of yours from one of the Uncharted-thons. And specifically, I wanted to... so you said that this is the PS4 version, and the reason the PS4 is sort of the one that you do is because... this is the one where you had found a lot of the airwalking tech and the other things. Can you talk about how you ended up finding that stuff?
Yeah, it was actually a fluke. So if you heard of this guy, his name's Frico. He does make Last of Us videos, but he was messing around because one of the first glitches that I found, and that was oh no, I didn't find it actually. I've lied completely. Someone else found something before me. It was the book launch, which basically, if you get on a ledge and you basically stagger and then open the journal, for whatever reason, you just get launched in the air a bit. And basically, the concept of that was, you just switch. You just have one gun in your hand, because when you have a gun in your hand in Uncharted, when you open the journal in Uncharted 2, it has to put the gun away before it will open the journal, but for whatever reason, they didn't stop you from moving while that's happening. So you can just open it and you'll keep walking off of a ledge for a little bit and then you'll float in the air. And that's used at a bunch as well. We call that a journal extend, where you walk a bit forward and then jump from it to jump further than you would normally be able to. But you basically do that, but off a ledge, and you go upwards instead of forwards. So you go up in the air and float. And the concept of that was, Frico was messing around with trying to do it while switching weapons. I was like, interesting. So I remember I opened the game one day and I was messing around and I swapped weapons and pressed journal and I just soft locked. I couldn't move and I just kept walking infinitely. And I was like, what? How'd I do that? And I was so shocked because that was big at the time. And eventually I figured out how to do it. And basically what you do is you have to press journal on the few frames once Wally's put the gun away. So in the middle of the switching weapons, it doesn't know what to do when you press it, so it just stops and soft locks. And then for the longest time, that was the way it worked. Just that, and there was a couple of skips you could do with it, because obviously with that you have to rely on hitting checkpoints, because once you do it, you're soft locked, you can't get out. So you have to rely on hitting a checkpoint to progress. And then one day I thought, you know what? I wonder what happens if I pull out the grenade right before I press journal, and that worked. I was able to pull out the grenade and hold it while I was airwalking, and then I threw it down and knocked me out the soft lock state. So that blew the game wide open. So. Wait, what was the question?
Well, so the question was, how did you get an airwalking? And you followed the natural thread there, which was to talk about how the pieces came together, because the run I watch is the finished product, where you're pulling out the grenade and the journal and you're flying up into the air, and then you're having to use the grenade to knock yourself out. But I think it's interesting to see like the progression, right? Because it wasn't just like, oh, this sprung fully formed from the earth, but instead it was, we knew about this other trick from before. Then I was able to, do it infinitely, soft lock it, as you said, and then, you were able, like, all right, well, how can I get out of this? And that really does break a lot of things up. Did you want to sort of highlight any instance, like any application of that trick that maybe is like your favorite in the run that allows you to skip a lot?
Well, one thing I didn't mention is that you can also combine the book launch with the airwalk. So you do the thing where you go up in the air, but soft lock yourself and you just keep going up. You never stop. So that's actually used a few times. But one of my favorite skips with the airwalk, there's a lot. I mean, there's one major trick we do in Chapter 5 where we airwalk for a good minute or two, good few minutes. And we basically skip from Chapter 5 to Chapter 7. And that saves a good, 6-7 minutes. Probably one of the more bigger ones in the game. But that's also one of the more harder ones in the game, because since you're airwalking for so long, you have to make sure you're going in the right direction. And it's very easy to mess it up. And you have to retry it. And it's really annoying to keep doing it. But I'd say that one, because of how far you go, is one of the more interesting ones to watch. But the airwalk has so many different applications, and I mean I could go through all of them if you want
to talk about sort of like what you use it for. I mean, but obviously, I think the way we've just described it and the way I kind of viewed it was like, oh well, you're just sort of traversing from one area to the other, almost like walking out of bounds in Blade 2. But it sounds like there's some more specific stuff going on, and so if you want to discuss some of those applications.
Well, there's so many different ways to use it. So the swapping weapons and soft locking, it is very broken. You can actually, I still don't know why it works, but if you go up against the wall, you probably would have seen this a lot. If you go up against the wall and you switch weapon and soft lock yourself in the middle of pushing yourself against the wall, you get the momentum from that push, and it's way higher than a normal walk. So then when you soft lock yourself into the airwalk and you go out the wall, you just fling off really fast, and we call those zips. And that's used quite a lot throughout the run, because obviously airwalking with a zip is a lot faster than airwalking normally in a straight line. And there's a few spots we do that. You can also do zips in certain locations to go up as well as just across. And there's some places where I also do that. But there's so many different ways to use it. And the Uncharted 1 is very broken, but Uncharted 2, like Uncharted 1 is basically just we use one trick the entire game. Uncharted 2 has a mass variety of stuff that you can use, like zips, regular airwalks, upwards airwalks, journal extends, and then you've got like the cover clipping as well, where basically if you aim while in cover and move backwards or move sideways, you basically kind of get half clipped in, and then you can just let go and you'll just clip through the wall you're uncovering. And that's used a lot as well. There's just so many different things you can use.
Yeah, so that last one you just mentioned, that's the one, there was one clip that really made me, there's one part where when you first discover, I think they're what they're called, like the Guardians. I always just called them like Yetis in my head, but like when you have a fight with them and you're hanging out with Drake's with Flynn, and you just clip into the floor, and then the Guardian just walks up to you and is like, well, I can't do anything about this.
Yeah, that's not faster. It's just that area's on a timer, so you just wait, and that's more funny because you can basically make it so he's running right into your face and it looks really wrong.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
I wanted to, so the one thing I wanted to hone in on specifically was when you kind of get into like what I would call like the back half of the game. I think it's chapter 17. there are some rocks that I think you do a zip off of. Is
Oh
that
no,
is that the same stuff that you were talking about, or is this like a different trick?
What? So did you not watch my PB? You only watched the marathon.
I only watched the marathon run.
Okay, so those rocks, there's a skip that we do in my PB and also in world record where it's horrible. So it's got like maybe a 10, like not even 10, like a 2% chance of working maybe. And you basically you put yourself in the middle of the rocks, you push up against them and hope that you get flung off into the distance. And then you have to hope that you have the right height, speed, and stuff to end up in the right direction to end up in the area where you first meet the Yeti. And that saves about 5 minutes if you get it first try. And, you know, for the longest time, we did know about it because it's one of those tricks where it's like, you think of it as like segmented only. It's like, why would someone do this to themselves? Because it's so random and so hard to do. But Erims decided to do it. And I was like, okay, well, thank you. And I was like, now I have to do it. So I had to, you know, for the longest, that's why I said I grinded it for 8 months, because this 8 months of grinding was me just trying to do this trick to get a run with it, and it was horrible. But it's probably the most interesting skip and fun one to watch because it just looks so funny when you just go flying off into the distance and you go really far too. But yeah, it's just dodgy collision, launches you, and you just got to hope for the best. That's pretty much it.
Now, do you have any... It sounds like you spent a lot of very concentrated time playing this game. Do you have any plans to return and try to improve? Honestly, from what you've just described, it sounds like maybe not the most great experience to grind.
Like I said before, it is one of my favorite games to run, and it's probably out of all of my speedruns, it's probably the game that I'm the best at. Like the one that my skill level on that is a lot higher than all the other games I've run because I've just done it for so long, and it's very hard. You can ask a lot of people who've played Uncharted games, you know, they all say that Uncharted 2 is the hardest. It's one of the hardest to run because a lot of these tricks that you do are very random and require really precise inputs. Like the gap that you leave in between holding the stick and then pressing journal has to be an exact amount. You can't just push the stick and then press journal. You have to do it perfectly for it to work. Stuff like that. So I will go back to it. I mean, I've been streaming it. After I stopped playing Last of Us 2, I've been streaming it again recently. And I would like to try and get a PB in it again, but it's just a lot of effort to keep playing for 40 minutes to get to that one trick for it to not work. And then I have to restart, and it's just... And then, of course, then when you get it, you have to then try and not choke the rest of the game. And Chapter 18 also has another skip, which is very difficult to do. So back to back, you got Chapter 17 and then 18, both have really hard tricks. Obviously, the 17 one is a lot more harder, but the 18 one can also lose you a lot of time too, and then your run's dead there as well. No,
I mean, it sounds like very optimized. I would say that it's just because of the variety of tech, and you know that as it became apparent that somebody who you already named decided to include that trick in the run. You know, that's what happens, right? Just everyone. Yeah, all right. Well, now if you want to get a top time, I guess we're doing this.
Also, shout outs to Hey French and Hutch T, who were the ones that found that horrible skip. I had no say in it, had no part. Basically, Hutch T found that dodgy wall and it launched him off into a direction. He laughed about it and then moved on. Hey French decided, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a skip, and I hate him for it to this day because it's horrible.
Well, you know, now that you're mentioning other people running Uncharted, I guess I should say that, like, you know, also shout outs to, I guess, Uncharted speedrunning for you know, putting on their own events, everything. Of course, the marathon VOD I watched was from an Uncharted-thon event, and that seems pretty dope. So, like, you know, shout outs to that, doing that organizing work. Yeah,
it's pretty, like, the Uncharted community is really, really good, and it's grown a lot over the past, like, couple of, like, maybe the last year or two. It's grown a lot, and that's why I decided to put on Uncharted-thon, because I wanted to bring all these people together to do a marathon based on just those games. And Uncharted-thon also isn't just about the Uncharted games as well. It's all about games similar, like Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider, stuff like that. So that's more so just to pad out the marathon so it's not too short. Because obviously there's only so many Uncharted games and so many categories. So, but it's fun, and that we do that once a year, as well as doing ShotSide once a year as well.
Yeah, no, you know, I think I had forgotten to write it down in my notes, but that was, you know, certainly the work of organization in speedrunning is really important, and you know, Shots Fired had always been one of my series, and so to see you sort of pick that up, because I think it was Shadex who had ran that previously, right?
Yeah, for a couple of years, the first marathon I ever did was in 2016, and I did Dead Space 3. And I was really nervous when I did that. It was the first ever time I'd done one. I'd never really spoke before, and if someone watches that run back, I sounded really nervous, but I did my best, and I felt comfortable doing the shots fired runs. And when they stopped, because obviously it was the first marathon I did, and I'd done pretty much every shots fired since then, knowing that it probably wouldn't carry on, I didn't want that to happen. So I messaged him and I was like, I do all these other marathons. Would I be able to take over and do shots fired myself? And I'm actually very surprised that he said I could. So that stemmed from that. And then Shots Fired Resurrection happened last year, which was the first one I did, which I think apart from a few errors, went very well.
Yeah, I thought it was outstanding. It felt like we picked up right where it left off. So
it did. I wanted to keep it, as close to home as I could, with the layouts and stuff. I wanted to not change too much. The only thing that would change is maybe the length, because I think Shadex had more of a lot of more people that could help. I didn't. So 5 days that I did, 4 or 5 days that I did, was a lot less than him doing like 7. So, but also speaking of shots fired, since this is going to come out before, the submissions for the new one are going to open on the 1st of September, and it's going to be called Shots Fired. I forgot the name already. Shots Fired Extraction. Imagine being an organizer and not remembering the name.
Awesome.
So Shots Fired Extraction.
Yeah, so I think right now this is going to probably folks will be hearing this podcast after that happens. But if you're listening to this around the time that this podcast first drops, early in September, I will absolutely be including links to the Shots Fired account. So if you are a runner and you play a game with it is unquestionably my favorite online marathon series. So follow the account to watch it, and then also if you're a runner, definitely submit as well. Those links, along with links to Mattmatt stuff and the runs that I watched for this interview, will be below. Let's do a drive by on Saboteur as we start getting towards the end of this. This is a game I recently casually played, and watching the run. Well, actually, I should first ask, was this a game that you had played in launch, or had you only come to it later as a speedrun?
I actually played Saboteur back in 2009 on Xbox 360, because I remember going to my friend's house and he had it, and I was like, oh, this looks really cool, so I bought it, and at the time, I loved it. I thought it was one of the best games I'd ever played, and speedrunning it was a different story, which I'll get onto in a minute, but yeah, I played it when it came out back on Xbox.
So when you came to speedrun it, were other people already working on it, or was this something where you had to bring routing to? Because I feel like we've talked about 2 games where you've really done a lot of great work in glitch finding and routing, or at least contributed. What was the case with Saboteur?
Well, let's just say in Saboteur I saved approximately about 2.5 hours.
Good.
Because I picked up the Saboteur basically as a meme, because I came across this video on YouTube where this guy managed to trigger the credits early, and I was like, hey, what was that? It must be like an Easter egg ending, but it still triggers the credits. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a run of this. So basically what you have to do is you have to unlock the perk to be able to shoot from your car before you do the first race, and for whatever reason, if you kill Dierker during the race, it just loads the credits. I think it was an Easter egg they put in, because after you skip the credits, it actually says, I can't remember what it says, but it basically tells you to retry. So it did fail, but it still plays the credits. And I was like, I'm going to do a run of this as best as I can, and I'm going to submit it. And I remember doing a run, and it was like 38 minutes or something like that. It was really slow, because I didn't have a route for how to get the perk. I just kind of knew what to do to get it, and I just did it, and then I submitted that. But I was like, I actually quite like this game. The driving is really good, and I say this to this day, but the driving in Saboteur is probably one of the best I've experienced in any like open world game that has driving in it. I think Saboteur is probably the most fun for me to do. So I like the driving. I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and run the actual game, do all the main missions, and I did that. My first run was like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I guess I did have a hand in routing, because I did find a bunch of different driving routes, a bunch of different strats for some of the levels, but some of it was already there, because at the time, I think the world record was by Griboro, and it was, I think, 2 hours, 10 minutes. I can't remember. It might have been more than that. But before he came along, also Griboro, shout out to him, he's an absolute legend at Saboteur. He's really good at it. But before he came along, there was only a couple runners, and their times weren't that optimized. It was like 2:30, 2:40, something like that. So they weren't that great. But then when he came along, he dropped the time down a lot. And I didn't really push for world record or anything fast like that. I just kind of liked running it. It was one of those games that was chill for me. So like Saboteur for me wasn't as serious as some of the other games I've ran are. So yeah, but I guess I did have a hand in routing some stuff, driving routes, stuff like that. But also I did actually find one of the only glitches in the game, which I guess we'll get onto in a little bit.
I'll ask about that in a second. One thing I want to just clarify for anyone listening. Now, with Saboteur, there was a sort of, I think, renaming of categories, because I remember years ago, the thing that you just described, where you get the perk and you shoot Durker during the race at the beginning of the game, that rolls the credits, that had been labeled any % for a period of time, but I think recently there was a decision that to call that any % credits warp, and then that the more like the normal, which I think was previously all story missions or just all missions or something.
All main missions.
All main missions. That's right. That is now the regular any %. Was it? I guess. I mean, it seems like that credits warp category isn't that fun. So maybe it was the decision just to sort of push people towards like, hey, this is really what we think the main category is.
I guess so. I mean, the decision was kind of mutual on a few people's part, because I got a PB. I think it's my PB I have now, where I noticed that my real time was actually slower than world record, but my time without loads was faster. So for the longest time, I thought that the loads were consistent, but they're not. So when we decided to change the timing to use the actual loader move and not real time, I basically brought up that maybe we should also change the category name, because I think that, what was all main missions is the most popular, it's the most fun to run, and whereas any % at the time is just basically you get a couple of perks and shoot a guy in a car, and it's not very fun, and it's also very frustrating as well, because it's a lot of RNG. So I was like, okay, maybe change the names, because I wanted all my missions to be the main category, to be any %, because another reason for wanting to change it as well was because obviously the credits warp, that is I'm pretty sure, I've never contacted anyone to confirm this, but I know it's a secret ending that was just put in there as like an Easter egg, and to me that doesn't feel like a proper actual any % skip. It just feels like a secret ending, which doesn't actually end the game, whereas any % what we have now as all my missions does actually end the game. When the credits roll, you skip them and it ends the game, whereas with the other way, you skip them and it says you failed the mission and you have to retry. So
right, yeah, you don't get the prompt to retry in the other one.
Yeah.
So
I thought it just made more sense.
Yeah. Now let's talk about tech. It sounded like earlier that you had maybe something that you discovered that you were proud of that you wanted to share when it came to glitches in Saboteur.
Yeah. So there's not many. I mean, I guess there's a few skips you can do, as you know, because I came in your stream and I talked about it, where there's a lot of missions where you can take alternate paths and finish it in a different way you're not intended to. But I wouldn't really call those glitches. They're just kind of using your brain. But there is a glitch. So have you finished the game?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so do you know, after you do the race with Durka at the end, and then basically you get a level 5 alarm and all the Nazis are after you, and
all right,
that alarm is really slow.
That alarm is really slow. I have to confess, I may have dealt with that in an unorthodox manner. I actually climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and they let you use the hiding spot bar inside the Eiffel Tower. I don't know why, but that's how I got rid of that alarm. And then I had to walk all the way back down, and then walk all the way back up again later. But
well, that's actually quite a good strategy. I mean, for a casual playthrough, but there's a lot of ways you can finish that part. So you can do a fight back, where you get introduces you to that earlier in the game, where you can do a fight back and you fight some enemies and then you lose, the alarm through killing them all, but that is also very slow, and you can also die easily on that for a level 5 alarm, because when you do a level 5 alarm, it spawns tanks as well when you do that fight back, and they can just destroy you. So that's not fun. You can also try to get lucky and lose it just by driving, but that is also very, 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 very random. So what I found, there's a glitch which has like, it's so broken. It should be more broken than it is, but it only has one use. So basically what you do is it's one of the most detailed glitches I've ever found, and I don't really know, like, I'll keep it in simple terms, but if you die, and then open the quick save menu and then load while you're dead and then retry at the same time, the game just bugs out. And if you're on a mission and sometimes it's very rare in Saboteur, but if there's some points where it'll save during a mission, because if you quick save, most of the time when you load that quick save, it will just take you back before the mission, so you won't be on it. But sometimes on a rare occasion, it will keep saved on that mission. And when you do that, when you blow yourself up, load the save, and then retry at the same time, basically it respawns you, but the game doesn't know you're on the mission anymore. It doesn't think you're on the mission. So what we do there is, as soon as that race ends, there's a checkpoint that saves the game. So we blow ourselves up, do that trick, respawn, and it just gets rid of the alarm. And basically then the game thinks, well, you're not on a mission anymore. You can actually see the mini markers on the minimap. And it's actually annoying because I've tried to find a way to skip missions using this, like kind of like the way you do in GTA, where you can make the game think you're on a mission when you're not. It's kind of the same concept, but it doesn't work, because if you go up to a mission marker and you press it, it doesn't do anything. So that's a shame. But with this, it gets rid of the alarm because you're not on the mission anymore, but the game doesn't update on, like what you're meant to do. But in the code, it still checks that you have to lose an alarm. So we crash through the Nazi thing, the Nazi checkpoint, gives you a level 1 alarm, you lose that instantly, then the game updates and it says go to the bell. So that's when it re-triggers the game, and it's like, okay, you've lost the level 5 alarm when you haven't. So that skips that for a level 5 alarm, and that's the only glitch in the run.
Yeah, that was really cool to see that at the, because I was having that experience of climbing up the Eiffel Tower in my recent casual play. I was like, all right, well, what's he going to do to get rid of the alarm? And then it was like actually a really interesting and technical glitch. And I was like, oh, that's pretty dope.
No, it's. I wish it had more application, but it doesn't. That's the only thing you can use it for at the moment. But that level 5 alarm used to cost me so many runs that it's just a lifesaver to have that now, because even though it just kind of looks slow at the start that you're doing it, it saves a lot of time in the end run, because you don't even have to worry about the alarm after that.
Is it an intended feature of the game that when you jump on an enemy's head, they die? Or is that like a glitch? Do you know?
I don't have a clue.
Okay.
I know that every time you jump on an enemy's head, they just die.
Yeah, I couldn't get over that. I think at one point in my casual play, I had jumped on Skylar's head, which it didn't kill her. But like I noticed that like there was a weird physics interaction when I did that. And then, of course, watching...
Well, actually, speaking of that, I swear that at one point I killed one of my like AI companions by jumping on them. I don't know who it was, but I swear I did that once. So I don't know.
Yeah,
but
who knows? Do you have any?
There's a brilliant level. What? There's a brilliant level called Needs of the Few or the Many, where it's that level with the truck where you do like an auto scroller where you're on a turret and the truck's driving around. Before you get on that turret, you have to save Veronique, and she walks around and she stands there and she's like, "Oh, thank you for saving me, Sean," and she gets in the truck. But sometimes, it's very rare, and this happened on a really good run, she just walks around wherever she wants to, and I'm standing there shooting someone, she just walks right in front of my gunfire and just dies. And it sent me all the way back to the start of the level, lost me like 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I remember dying on that level at least once or twice. That was definitely... It was, and I in watching the speedrun, of course, you just, as you should, drive straight in there and like, and break things up immediately instead of going onto the roof. And I was like, that makes sense. As you said earlier, sometimes it's just using your brain to route it.
Yeah, because like in that level, you obviously meant to get in the blimp, and then it takes you there. And that blimp section where you get into the blimp and it takes you there is really cool. But the fact that you can just literally crash through the gate if you know where to go, and it just updates the objective, is just great. It saves so much time. There's a lot of places throughout the game where you can do that sort of stuff as well. Yeah,
and I'm glad the game handles it too.
Yeah, it's like at the start, obviously you're meant to go and speak to Luke, and then you go somewhere to steal some dynamite, and then you go to the the place with the tankers and you blow them up. But you can literally just drive to it, and if you get 2 cars to blow up next to them with grenades, it just triggers the cutscene, and you can continue the level as normal. And it's also very, very fast as well. I think that saves about 2.5 minutes. I guess you could call that one a skip because that's not really intended. But yeah, so if you mess that up though, you have to restart because if you use the grenades and it doesn't blow up, you can't blow it up, so you have to restart, which is annoying for marathons. But yeah, it's one of the more. I don't think it was me that found that. I think someone else found that. I can't remember. But that was not a trick when I started running the game.
Now, do you have any plans to return to this one to challenge Gaburo or anybody?
I may do it for like marathon runs and stuff, but I don't really want to grind it for a PB. It's fun, but it's very frustrating. And since it being an open world game, cars you get loses you time, traffic loses you time. It just becomes annoying. But
yeah.
Also, I would like to give a quick shout out to Max Payne 2. Max Payne 2 is a very good speed game. I don't really mention it to talk about today because I've only been running it a couple of months, but it's a very good run. And that's another game that I wanted it to run for a long time, but never did. But I eventually sat myself down and learned it, and I actually ran it for a Corona relief at GDQ at the start of this year as well, and that was fun. But Max Payne 2 is a very good speedrun, and
it's a good game, and I think it goes. Obviously, you're, as I kind of said before, you're almost bursting with the seams of just sort of interest in different kinds of games, and Max Payne 2 is a great game. And I remember, I feel like years ago I had watched. Honestly forget who, but
it probably was Saint Million that did that because he used to be really popular with that game.
Yeah. All right, let's start to wind things down a little bit. One of the things that I do to add a little connective tissue to the interview series is to get a question from my previous guest for my next guest, and and to continue the chain from there. So my previous, as of the time of the release of this pod, my previous guest was Jabo, a Fallout runner, and he had this question for you, which is, if you could go back in time and choose a game to speedrun and stream on Twitch, what game and what period of time?
I would go back to running Last of Us and not stop, because I ran that game and I quit pretty early on to move on to other stuff. But if I'd have carried on doing it, I felt like my stream could have grown a lot more, a lot quicker. So if I could go back and do that, I would do that.
No, that's an extremely fair answer. That's it's kind of one of those things where I feel like with that question, there's two tacks. There's sort of like your personal, I would have done this differently, and then there's also just like sort of the realm of fantasy, like, oh, if I could have been there at the beginning of, I don't know, something huge and ancient like Quake or something, like, but that does also mean now that I will need a question from you for my next guest, and anything sort of gaming speedrunning related. Can be, favorite soundtrack composer, can be more specific questions, really anything you want to do, in terms of speedrunning or gaming that you would give to the next speedrunning guest, who I'm not going to tell you who it is right now, so you'll have to make it pretty generally applicable.
This is a very tough one because I'm not very good with questions. Could I ask, like, someone to do something instead? Or does it have to
be like to name something, or like to?
I mean, yeah, I guess you could. Okay, I guess a good question would just be to ask, what their favorite game is of all time. That's a simple one.
Okay, we'll go. Yeah, no, that has not been done. Overall favorite game, because obviously I'll be asking what their favorite speedrun is, but that doesn't necessarily mean those are one and the same. So we'll do that.
I mean, to be fair, my favorite game is Last of Us, but it's not my favorite speedrun. So
exactly. Going into the future, are there future games that you are that haven't come out yet, that are coming out in the future, have been announced, that you're excited to get to?
Well, I guess the only one that's coming out somewhat soon that I probably might run is the new Dark Pictures game, which will be Little Hope. So they released Man of Medan last year, and I ran that on co-op. But I have this thing of ever since Until Dawn came out, I like to run supermassive games. So when they release Little Hope, I'll probably do that as well, which is coming out in October. Apart from that, I don't really know. Most of the time when it comes to me running something that comes out, it's usually just if I play it and I like it enough, I'll do it.
Right.
But I don't really tend to plan ahead of what I'm going to do. because as much as you may find this hard to believe, I don't really play that many games anymore. Most of my free time is just spent sitting there listening to music, and that's it. So I don't do much. I play some games with friends occasionally, or do some speedruns, but there's not really many games that I look forward to anymore because I just know that they're usually huge disappointments to me. So
yeah, no, that happens sometimes. Sometimes you wanna you wanna believe something will be right up your alley, and it's just not.
No.
So, where can people find you, and what should they be looking for? I assume you're Twitch, but feel free to plug anything else.
Well, I upload most of my speedruns to YouTube, also some other niche little videos sometimes, which is just Mattmatt. My Twitch is also just Mattmatt, that's where I stream most of my speedruns, and then also Twitter, but I don't really use that, but feel free to follow me anyway. That's Mattmatt10111, because I can't change that at. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, yeah, and of course, all those links, as well as links to other things we've discussed, such as the marathon VODs that I watched, as well as links to Shots Fired, so you all can watch Shots Fired Extraction this fall, which again, one of my favorite online marathon series, no doubt about it. Mattmatt,
one of my favorites too.
Yeah. Mattmatt, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all this information.
You are welcome. It was a pleasure.
All right, but I do need one more thing from you to end it. Usually what I like to do is use a very cheesy catchphrase like, let's boost on out of here. And when I say that, I'm going to need you to do like your best rocket engine booster noise.
Oh, now you put me on the spot now.
Are you ready?
I guess so.
All right, folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here.